Welcome to Twists of Life, where every story has an unexpected turn. Stories of joy and sorrow, hope and redemption, just like the life we all live. Make yourself comfortable. It's time to begin. The marker in Alice's hand drew another circle on the wall calendar. She frowned in concentration, then thought, "No, it needs to be red. The event is a joyful one, and this black looks as if it marks morning. What if it's a bad sign that I'm circling important dates in a dark color on such a bright sheet?" Counting the marked days, she sighed. Exactly 2 months remained until the estimated due date assigned to her at the district women's clinic. The pregnancy, her first and so changeable, made her alternately tearful and immensely happy. Her susceptibility and lack of experience took their toll. Yesterday, for instance, her husband Ben caught her doing something utterly bizarre. She was biting off pieces of school chalk with gusto and chewing them with visible pleasure. According to the ultrasound promises, a boy was due to arrive. Her mother-in-law and husband had already bought so much for the baby. And everything, as it should be, in blue and light blue tones. Where did these ridiculous rules prescribing what colors infants of which sex should wear even come from? It was empty, having no effect whatsoever on the health of the little one or his future happiness. Something quite different, slightly frightening, was told to her by the doctor at the clinic. "Mommy, the calcium content in your body is practically zero right now. You should drink more milk. Don't ignore cottage cheese. Indulge yourself with poppy seed buns. They have a lot of this element. Just don't overdo it so you don't gain excess weight. They will at least somewhat replenish the deficiency by the end of the pregnancy. Otherwise, it won't take long to lose your teeth. How many cavities have you already had filled in the past months, and 2 teeth had to be extracted? Take this problem more seriously." Allie was initially shocked by these words, but as usual, her mother calmed her down, immediately dispensing a portion of advice over the phone. "Daughter, I licked whitewash off the stairwell walls with both you and Tommy. In my time, what special diets were there for expectant mothers? A kilo of buckwheat, half a kilo of beef, a block of butter once a week. That was all the vitamins and minerals. And look how you grew up. Sturdy, healthy. If calcium is really bad, buy some school chalk, a couple of boxes. Eat it. The calcium will go where it needs to. Just make sure you don't take the colored ones. In this matter, beauty isn't important, but benefit." Alice initially treated her mother's recommendation with irony. Pharmacies were full of trendy medicines and supplements. The women's clinic had an entire stand with advertising promises. Allegedly, some colorful pill would instantly solve all the health problems of mother and baby. Not presentations, but pure fairy tale visions. The young woman didn't believe these illusory promises. But the force of circumstance. On the same landing as them lived a girl whom her mother-in-law had dubbed an impossible bookworm and straight-A student. A couple of days later, Allie was walking down the street and met this young diligent creature near the neighboring stationery store. The young lady was very happy to see her. "Aunt Alice, how good it is that I met you. The teacher told us to get colored paper and paints by tomorrow. Mom has the second shift today. I broke my piggy bank cat, took the money, decided to buy it myself, but I'm afraid to go into the store." "Let's go," Allie responded briskly. "I haven't been to stores that sell diaries and notebooks in 100 years. I've wanted to buy a pattern album for ages, but never got around to it. Now I have the time. So, let's browse." The two curious individuals examined all the display cases in the store. It was then that Alice saw a box of snow-white chalk, which she immediately wanted to try. She took 2 small packs to sample. At home, she waited until the ubiquitous Eleanor Margaret left. Allie was already on maternity leave. No need to go to work. A blessing. She tried to spend as little time at home as possible. Being side by side with Ben's mother, Eleanor Margaret, all day was quite the pleasure. She'd rather walk in the fresh air than communicate with the old rat. Alice involuntarily glanced around, wondering if any passers-by had heard her seditious thoughts about her second mother. The woman didn't love her mother-in-law with every fiber of her soul, and there were 100 reasons for it. Allie was, in the opinion of the urban aristocrat Eleanor Margaret, an unrefined country bumpkin. In her kitchen with cups of transparent, delicate porcelain, she behaved like a bull in a china shop, didn't know how to sit, didn't understand how to answer Ben's mother's intrusive questions. A tea party in the luxurious living room wasn't offered to her during her first visit. Too much honor for a lout from a distant village where you had to go to a pole on the outskirts for mobile service, and the internet had only been installed 2 years ago. For many, like Alice's grandfather, it remained a UFO. Unnecessary, superfluous, intoxicating. He immediately christened the World Wide Web as such. Alice had bowed, thought about her life in her grandfather's hut on the edge of the village. It seemed like such a long time ago, as if 1,000 years had passed. She wouldn't have gone to the big regional city to test her fate, but her grandfather died. He sat opposite her in the old cracked armchair, drinking tea from a pot-bellied samovar, and then just twitched a couple of times in convulsions and fell silent forever. Allie was scared. She understood that 90 years was no joke, that this moment would come someday. Her mother gave birth to her late in life, fathered by a visiting businessman who came to their village either to manage something or rebuild something. The lively shop assistant from the grocery store had by then already started batting her eyelashes at married fellow villagers in hopes of a great bright love. The wives kept their men on tight leashes, but Sue had trouble from her youth. A thin waist, steep hips, a lush top that even embarrassed the young physics teacher during lessons, causing red spots on his young face. Susan was disproportionate, small in stature, a tiny woman. The women in the village had been calling her our mini Venus for 15 years. Where had it ever been seen? A girl in the 8th grade looking like a mature woman who had already given birth more than once. A tiny doll. By the age of 18, Susan's body took pity on her, suddenly starting to grow intensely upwards. It apparently knew no bounds here either. In 2 years, the unusual girl's height reached 180 centimeters, then stopped. It didn't forget to increase the lushness and size of all her other feminine charms. Men in the village, seeing such a miracle in female form, cautiously glanced at their companions, avoiding Susan by 2 kilometers. What kind of romances weren't attributed to the poor thing? It was all in vain. At the trade technical school, Susan fell in love for the first time with a guy from the city basketball team. Passions burned, sparks flew. She got pregnant almost immediately and was very scared. She got rid of the baby, whose grandmother midwife's address the girls in the dormitory told her about, at the first opportunity. Later, she listened to the female doctor's verdict that she would likely not have children again, without tears. Who seriously thinks about motherhood at 18 when completely rootless? Susan's mother died young. A blood clot broke off right in the field while picking tomatoes. The sun was scorching, the workday from dawn till dusk. The young woman didn't know anything about her thrombosis. When would she pay attention to the veins on her body swollen blue, if summer fed winter? So Susan had no one to talk to about women's matters since childhood. Her father raised her himself by average parental standards, not very strictly, without whips or carrots, surrounding her with sincere love and care as best he could. How many lonely wives in the village looked at him? A flint of a man. If anything happened, when and with whom, nobody knew anything about it. He didn't notice the peculiarities of Susan's appearance. He himself was a tall, strong, healthy man. He considered his daughter to be just right. A pleasure to behold, he often told his daughter. Don't listen to those gossips at the well. All they want to do is chatter and slander you. Finish your studies, Susie. Come back to your little homeland. Our house is sturdy. My grandchildren will live in it. So know that you are always welcome here. And that is very important for a person, to have their own walls. Susan obeyed her father. She broke up with the hero lover from the basketball club almost immediately after the pregnancy. He found a new girlfriend while she was recovering after the operation. In the city, besides her diploma, nothing else held her. And just then, the shop assistant and manager of the village store, in one person, was going from the village to the city to her daughter for grandchildren. To help. Susan took her warm, established place in the store for many years. She became the permanent queen of all local trade. She managed skillfully. Over time, a snack bar pub was added to the store. A men's interest club. Nobody grumbled, except when truckers from the depot turned off the road for food, or visiting businessmen came to help the villagers with something for a while. These fellows didn't miss the statuesque Susan. It was difficult even for married knights to resist such arguments. In the village, people turned a blind eye to Susan's affairs with strange men. She immediately sends away our local suitors, those dogs, who have their nature, the women said. But visitors are a different matter. They are here today, and tomorrow they are far away. Susan was generous, not greedy. If one of her fierce admirers blinked, cheap vodka would suddenly disappear from Susie's almighty display for half an hour. When someone's husband dropped by the grocery store and complained about lack of money, she would wait for the payment for new shoes. Or someone would get an extraordinary birthday cake. Alice's father was short and also frail. But how he knew how to court women. Seeing Susan behind the counter for the first time, he froze, was silent for a couple of minutes, and then burst into very beautiful poems by an unknown author. Later, Susan suggested that her little lover wrote them himself in his free time, a name and patronymic that didn't match his appearance. Alice's middle name was Georgievna, but in character and temperament, her father was truly a real George. Women looked ironically in his direction only for the first 5 minutes. Then they began to melt and swoon. George Robert knew how to get everything from who knows where. Exotic orchids, French perfumes from the latest Parisian collection, mind-blowing handmade chocolates from Belgian chocolatiers. He elevated Susan to the pedestal of his adoration, admiration, worship. He took her to Sochi, where she saw the sea for the first time in her life. He took her to elite restaurants that could only be found within a 300-kilometer radius of the village. There was only one drawback. He was married. His lawful wife, silently somewhere far beyond the horizon, lived serenely alone in the capital, dressed from head to toe in everything best. She turned a blind eye to her husband's affairs. She herself never lacked for anything. She met her faithful husband a couple of times a year. The rest of the time she lived for her own pleasure. How it happened that Susan became pregnant in the epicenter of a passionate romance with George is known only to the heavens and Providence. The future father received the news without enthusiasm, quickly packed his belongings, and disappeared from the village forever. The woman herself, like her father, the future grandfather, were on cloud 9. They had already given up hope that children's voices would again be heard in their house. In the story of the mighty George Robert, it has not yet been mentioned what he did, traveling around cities and villages. It was simple. Nowadays, in modern slang, he would easily be called a crisis manager. Back then, he was a jack of all trades, raising any enterprise from ruins out of boredom. What he was reviving in their village remained a mystery to Susan and her neighbors. He vanished so skillfully that no one could even find any traces afterwards. One wanted to ask, but was there a boy? But the local residents didn't know Maxim Gorky's work and his novel, The Life of Klim Samgin, very well. Alice was born when her mother Susan had just turned 40. From the first day of her life in the village, her grandfather and mother doted on the girl, loved, raised, and cherished her, until an unexpected event occurred, causing widespread resonance in the village. A German fell in love with Susan, who had come to install some equipment at a mineral fertilizer plant. Healthy, nearly 2 meters tall, looking as if he was carved from oak with an axe, rough red-faced, with huge hands like sledgehammers. What was interesting was that this gentleman spoke excellent Russian. Necessity forced him to learn the extremely difficult language. For several years he was closely involved in projects on Russian lands, was a reasonable man, and believed that he should understand his partners not by pointing and gesturing. He was generally a man of unexpected actions and deeds, firmly rooted, knowing what he wanted and from whom. One day, he almost lifted Susan by the fur collar of her coat with 2 fingers and moved her a couple of meters forward so she wouldn't step into a dirty autumn puddle covered with a thin, uncertain layer of the first snow. Everyone around gasped. The German giant, without looking back, calmly went about his business. He followed the store manager everywhere, buying goods in wild quantities and taking them somewhere. Susan would run home to her daughter to feed her. The rest of the time the grandfather raised the granddaughter. And how he guarded her. He stood behind the fence and that was it. And everything would have continued to be just as romantic, but the German turned out to be quite pragmatic. He declared to Susan, "I want you to come with me to Germany. I have my own sawmill in the foothills of the Alps. I am quite well off. You will have everything, from fresh mountain air to your own chalet in a picturesque location. Your daughter will stay in Russia." Father and daughter deliberated for a short time. "Go, my dear, if this man is to your liking. You don't have that many years measured out for personal female happiness. Alice will stay with me, in her native home, in her native village." 2 years later, Mother Susan gave birth to Alice's younger brother, Paul. Since then, she regularly came to Russia from her blessed land once every 3 years. She lived in plenty, but the stingy German kept a close eye to ensure she didn't materially help her relatives in Russia more than gifts for Christmas and birthdays. Europeans are a thrifty people. Every euro cent is accounted for. The only thing he didn't hinder was her conversations, first by phone and then by Skype, with Allie, who had by then moved from her grandfather to the city. Everyone in the village looked at Allie with a kind smile. She was very similar in appearance to Susan, but turned out to be her smaller copy. Neither grenadier height nor excessive lushness. "Allie, you should go to the city, to a theater school," the women told her. "With your looks, you'd be captivating." "Oh, come on," Alice waved them off. "I'd rather go work as an accountant in the village office or a nurse in our village hospital. We'll see then." Later, she did think about the words of the women from her village. And they were right. Since childhood, I've loved spending hours messing around with the simplest porridge, dough, or some intricate cookies, the recipe for which I accidentally got from a friend's mother. I'll talk to my grandfather and apply to a culinary school in the city. It's not rocket science. I can manage it. Allie was drinking tea with blackcurrant jam in the kitchen, quietly rejoicing that Eleanor Margaret was visiting a friend today. For a long time, the doorbell startled her. Strange, Ben and his mother have their own keys. Who could it be? On the doorstep stood the neighbor, the mother of the straight-A student girl with whom Alice had recently bought chalk at the stationery store. "Allie, come downstairs." Eleanor Margaret felt unwell after a phone call, right on the bench under the house. "People have already called an ambulance." Allie immediately hopped downstairs. Near Eleanor Margaret, the neighbor from the first floor was fussing, waving a cotton swab in front of her nose. "It's harmless," she explained to the others. "Just ammonia. I always use it to bring my mother around. She's prone to unexpected fainting spells due to weak blood vessels." Alice's mother-in-law opened her eyes slightly. Her gaze focused on her daughter-in-law. "We have trouble, Alice. Ben fell from a height at the construction site, killed instantly." Colored circles swam before Allie's eyes. She grabbed her huge belly, then spread her hands helplessly and plopped down right on the curb, which for some reason didn't seem so hard up close. As if through some muffled barriers, she heard the voices of doctors. "Let us through. Step aside. Oh, and his wife needs emergency care too. She's about to give birth. She'll start after news like this." Allie was supported by a man in a blue medical uniform who gave her an injection in the arm. Then, twilight, darkness, a blackout. She only woke up 3 days later, when Ben's body had already been buried. The doctor told her then, "Alice Georgievna, we barely managed to save your baby. The threat of miscarriage was too real given such stress. As cruel as it sounds, you had no business being at the funeral procession. Another test for your nervous system could have unpredictable consequences. By the way, your mother-in-law couldn't say goodbye to her son either. She's in cardiology on another floor of this same building." Ben was buried in a closed coffin, pieced together. Even the pathologists couldn't guarantee they could make the remains presentable. Why then disturb the public who came to see him off on his last journey with horrors? It would be better for everyone in a closed state. All the funeral arrangements for the employee were taken care of by the construction company where he worked as a foreman. He'd only been in the team for a short time, but had already earned respect. He was a good guy, fair and not malicious. A boss over ordinary craftsmen. He didn't boast about his diploma, didn't give smart advice. On the contrary, he observed more experienced employees, remembered, and learned. And why did he go up to the very top, the 25th floor of the new building? What did he want to personally check there? Why did he suddenly fall out of the window? Everyone asked these questions for a long time. The answers were never found. From a safety perspective, everything was clean. Work overalls, helmet, everything in place. What about the windows not being glazed yet? Well, the construction process is in full swing. It's not time yet. 10 days later, the case was classified as a typical accident. Period. The archive will gather dust on shelves in a dimly lit room for a long time now. Eleanor Margaret was discharged almost simultaneously. Now they had to somehow reconcile with each other until the boy's birthday, learn to live without Ben. Both women behaved quietly, carefully avoiding sharp corners and topics. They even went to the cemetery together amicably, like a loving mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, each with an armful of flowers, each with her own inner sorrow. At home, they set their widow's and mother's memorial table, remembered Ben together, and cried. Eleanor Margaret was quieter than water, lower than grass. She finally handed over the kitchen management to her daughter-in-law, who was a great culinary professional. It had been like that before anyway. Alex Yuk Alice, a cook, a second caring mommy. Alice said these words to herself in quotation marks. She carried pineapples and oranges from the supermarket for her, another pregnant whim she couldn't get enough of. She even went to the stationery store and brought back a new batch of school chalk. Alice, if you like this chalk so much, then the baby really does need it. Gnaw away for your health. I won't object anymore, since wise nature has ordained it so. A week before giving birth, after severe emotional distress, it was decided to hospitalize Alice, gently prepare her for the new physiological test, and keep her under constant medical supervision. Johnny was born like a bright sun. The medical staff in the maternity ward even came to admire him. He wasn't even a day old, but his whole head was covered in black resinous curls. His gray-blue eyes took up half his face, and his lips were beautifully outlined, which any staircase would envy. Eleanor Margaret couldn't get enough of looking at her handsome grandson. She got out her stash of family treasures inherited from her mother and grandmother. She went to a jeweler she knew. 2 hours later, she returned accompanied by 2 strong men. Everything for Johnny. Only the best. The new stroller for walks outside looked more like a spaceship, so complex was its design. An ingenious table for all occasions, to change the small, delicate body, apply baby creams and powder. A crib with bells and whistles, transforming into a fanciful large cradle. An army of toys and books, enough for an entire division of babies. Stacks of clothes for all ages from 1 month to a year. You could change outfits every half hour. Alice initially looked at this frenzy with amazement, then got tired of arguing with her mother-in-law and submitted. Her grandmother, who miraculously doted on Johnny, was ready to be with him 24 hours a day. Allie didn't expect such agility from the elderly woman, who was a little slow, lazy, and unaccustomed to housework. By the age of 3 months, Johnny had noticeably gained strength, reached the correct weight according to the pediatrician, and caused neither his mother nor grandmother any worry. Alice even got enough sleep, to the envy of other mothers she walked with in the yard with strollers. It seemed that life was getting better, grief was slowly receding, and peace and tranquility reigned. Allie had even almost stopped missing her grandfather. Her cheeks turned pink, and there was plenty of milk in her breasts for feeding her son. It was like paradise, if you didn't remember the recent family tragedy. Folk wisdom says that trouble often creeps up unnoticed, on soft paws of future problems. That day, Allie just got up at night to check if everything was all right with Johnny, and she was thirsty. From her mother-in-law's room came a quiet, insidious whisper. Lately they had been living peacefully side by side. Allie was almost about to go back to bed when she heard her name. Of course, female curiosity got the better of her. She quietly crept to the slightly ajar door, and within a minute froze at what she heard. "I can't wait for Benny to come home. My poor boy. He barely agreed to this whole cruel spectacle." Alice sank to the floor by the door, her legs refusing to hold her. What was happening? Was her husband alive? Then where had he been hiding all this time? What kind of joke was this? Witnesses had told her that the sight was terrifying to look at, a complete mess of bones and tissues. Allie listened intently, and her mother-in-law seemed to deliberately lower her voice so that her daughter-in-law would hear every word. "I've been putting up with this clumsy girl for a year. I only went along with Ben because I wanted grandchildren. I fanatically wanted them. But not from such a village dumpling. Have you seen this walking misunderstanding with chubby cheeks? She doesn't know how to dress or do her hair. Her only virtue is that she cooks magnificently. Otherwise, I wouldn't even hire her as a cook in my house. What was he thinking? Falling for her? She's got nothing going for her." Her mother-in-law changed position and leaned against the back of the sofa. "It's arranged. They'll write a report on her, saying she stole food there, and even finished off the leftover drinks on the tables in secret. Her friend works there. This simpleton's mother lives in Germany, clings to her husband with both hands. She's no help to her daughter-in-law. Her grandfather passed away recently. He would have helped." Allie remembered how Ben treated her. Evenly, attentively, one could say, gently and affectionately. He always praised her pleasant feminine fullness. He went to bed with her with obvious pleasure, never showed disgust or contempt for her appetizing figure. Could it be that for a whole year he was just playing the role of a loving husband, waiting for her to give birth to Johnny? The young woman feverishly put 2 and 2 together, but couldn't recall any flaws in the behavior of her supposedly deceased husband. She could have given him marks of good and excellent in his diary for his kind, warm attitude towards her without hesitation. A decision grew and strengthened in her mind. To leave immediately, to hide within the native walls of her grandfather's house, and then she would see what to do next. Alice would not be lost. She waited until Eleanor Margaret quieted down after going to the kitchen for sleeping pills from the first aid kit. Now their escape with Johnny was a matter of technique. Into 2 large bags, only the bare essentials. She would leave the luxurious baby items in this house filled with betrayal and lies. She paced and thought and paced. Ben couldn't have. A little weak-willed, and in addition, weak-charactered, but definitely not a vile person. He wouldn't dare take their child away from her. Or did he find out the truth about Johnny? The truth that only a couple of people in this world knew, reliable, and not talkative. Who was to blame, she would think about later. But now she couldn't lose precious time. The first bus to her village was leaving. She had to get to the bus station on time. Although Eleanor Margaret considered her a naive simpleton in worldly matters, Alice, who grew up under her grandfather's wing, was a pro. She threw food from the refrigerator into a bag, grabbed diapers, clothes, and baby cosmetics for the first time. Half an hour later, the front door of the apartment slammed shut. Allie and Johnny were gone without a trace. Ben had regretted 1,000 times getting involved in this whole story, with his mother's whims and wild desires. He met the dumpling Allie in the cafe where she worked as a cook after culinary school, and he liked her so much. Against the background of the lean Eleanor Margaret with her perpetually sour expression, the lively, smiling girl seemed the embodiment of softness and cozy warmth. Ben was building a construction project at that time on the territory of the machine-building plant, to which Alice's establishment belonged. One day, the young man came here for lunch and met the eyes of a mischievous, plump girl. In them, there were sparks of laughter and a little, as it seemed to him, some hidden sadness. For some reason, he wanted so much to remove this sadness from her eyes. His heart even ached. While he was thinking about all this, standing near the serving line, the skillful hands of the young cook quickly filled his plates with the first and second courses. There was a drink left, which became the reason for their acquaintance. "Miss, what would you recommend for dessert? Fruit drink with pancakes or cherry compote with a cream puff?" Alice's answer, using a quote from the cartoon about Prostokvashino, made him laugh heartily. "Both, and you can skip the bread." After the work shift, when streams of factory workers headed through the checkpoint to the factory dormitory, Ben waited for Alice at the exit. In his hands, he shyly crumpled a long cellophane bag with a single burgundy rose tied at the bottom with a white satin ribbon. It seemed to him that the flower looked both modest and solemn this way. Their conversation didn't flow at first. The girl was incredibly surprised by his attention. He himself already regretted his idea, but then the ice broke. Allie was rushing to the dormitory for a colleague's birthday and invited Ben to be her escort. The party was fun. Nothing like his mother tried to organize under the guise of social gatherings at their house, constantly pushing her excitable friends to visit. In one of the spacious rooms of the dormitory, where the female workers already lived independently, alone, everything at the table was without curtsies or special manners. Large bowls of salads, lots of fried meat and potatoes, pickles on the windowsill in 3-liter glass jars, herring with large rings of onion. Everything was so simple and so appetizing that it took your breath away. They listened to music CDs from films, then danced a lot to other hits. Towards the end, they sang in unison to a guitar. And everything was clear, without hidden agendas or pitfalls. They came to Alice's room without arranging anything beforehand. They just left the table hand in hand and walked to her door that way. The girl unlocked the door and made an inviting gesture. Ben didn't object, didn't seem surprised, just stepped into the doorway after Allie and drowned in her tenderness. He wasn't new to such entertainment, but reality surpassed all his expectations. Allie was a tender miracle, knowing exactly what a man might like. Life changed in those very minutes. They hurried back to the dormitory together, closed the doors behind them, had dinner together like a real family, and then rushed to bed to be in each other's arms as soon as possible. Both were content. Both were happy. A month later, Alice, blushing and embarrassed, told Ben she was pregnant. A couple of days later, they stood before the stern eyes of his mother, who was finishing a cake she had brought with her in the kitchen. Another month later, they quietly got married, and Allie moved into the aristocratic chambers of her husband's mother. She couldn't have imagined that her mother-in-law, after keenly assessing the rosy-cheeked village girl, immediately decided to use her as a vessel for carrying a grandson or granddaughter. The insidious circle, in Eleanor Margaret's opinion, had closed. Now she patiently awaited the birth of the heir. Every day, Ben began to look at his unsuspecting wife with different eyes, focusing on the thin hair opposite him, while the water still slowly formed a muddy puddle under the lying stone. And then the beautiful Elizabeth returned after studying in England. This person was the daughter of one of Eleanor Margaret's friends. Wonderfully beautiful, educated, wealthy. The very blue blood Alice's mother-in-law dreamed of. This is the woman she saw next to her beloved son. One problem: the girl couldn't have children due to a congenital female pathology. Therefore, she and her friend developed an entire Barbarossa plan, only not like that, but much crueler. Eleanor Margaret was carelessly chatting on the phone with her future supposed co-mother-in-law on that ill-fated night. This whole performance was staged only for Alice. Even on the grave of the unidentified body, bought from the morgue through connections, a plaque with Ben's name was erected. Everything had to look extremely plausible. Allie believed the legend implicitly. And as for the doctors in the private clinic, everything was arranged with them without unnecessary questions or obstacles. At stake in this game was Johnny, a pampered, well-fed angel with black shiny curls, with huge eyes that were starting to darken. The future happiness of his grandmothers, a real little lord. By all external signs, such a prize was worth the investment. Eleanor Margaret's multi-step plan collapsed. Her daughter-in-law vanished instantly, unbelievably. The women decided to bring in heavy artillery. Ben was recalled from Switzerland for the showdown. The conversation between mother and son was short. Ben expressed complete disappointment in Lizzie, called her an empty-headed airhead, and wondered how she could have received such a brilliant education. He, being in Europe, his mistress and future potential wife, was only interested in endless shopping in salons and boutiques. She constantly pouted, criticized everything, declaring that none of these things were worthy of her august person. Sometimes Ben wanted to run away to the ends of the earth, just to be far away from this soulless doll. "Mom, how could you even think that I could live my life with this worthless creature?" Ben wisely kept silent about the fact that encounters in bed with Lizzie turned into another ordeal for him every time. The problem wasn't even that the young woman was cold as a log. She was completely devoid of even a hint of tenderness, didn't respond to his desire, which at first still somehow arose. By her hen-like nature, she also pouted, either complaining that he kissed her too roughly, or examining a fantastic bruise that supposedly appeared after his touch. The man knew for sure that he hadn't used an ounce of force, carefully trying to be gentle and affectionate. Lizzie's attacks amazed him, caused complete bewilderment, and then outright rejection. Before his eyes stood his Allie, his calm, not hysterical, friendly wife. Now it seemed to him that a dizzying veil had fallen from his eyes. What had his mother come up with, after all? What difference did it make where Alice was from? A remote village? A provincial town? A regional center? The capital? A person, good or bad, soulful or cruel, could be born anywhere. One might think that Eleanor Margaret herself had any connection to true high society. And who allowed people to be divided into castes? Ben didn't express all these conclusions to his mother, knowing it was useless. He wouldn't get through. He only reported that he assumed his wife could only have gone to her grandfather's house, to her native village. That's where he would look for her. Whether Eleanor Margaret wanted it or not, he was already independent enough to first rent another place for himself, and then earn enough for a new apartment. His mother's power was over. From now on, he would live by his own laws and rules. On the bus heading to Alice's homeland, Ben involuntarily compared the artificial Elizabeth and the natural, real Allie again. These thoughts were clearly not in favor of his mistress. And he also dreamed of seeing his son. His mother said he turned out very handsome and well-built. The idea of taking him away from Allie was wild, cruel, unfair. Where were his brains when he agreed to this crazy adventure? When he got off at the stop in the village, it was already almost completely dark. Ahead of Ben, two women with large, heavy bags were hurrying towards the village. Their luggage didn't bother them at all. They walked briskly, chatting about something. Ben thought again that his wife's world was a completely different province, and he hadn't even tried to get to know it better. He had only listened to his mother, and sometimes looked at Allie with irony. At the crossroads, he turned right. He still had to walk to the end of the long street to the edge of the village. Near Alice's grandfather's house, Ben hesitated a little, trying to find the right words. He hadn't come up with a convincing version of the prank. The script of the film commissioned by his mother was too cruel and unforgivable. He didn't have to look for or call Alice. She was standing on the porch, holding little John in her arms. Ben rejoiced in his soul. He was a father now. He and his Allie had a son. What a delusion it was to exchange a native, understandable woman for another, a stranger, who never became even a little bit her own. The man resolutely pushed the unlocked gate. "Allie, my dear, can you forgive me for this vile act? Let's leave it in the past. Close this terrible page. It's me, your Benny, as you like to call me, and in your arms is our son Johnny. I will never hurt you again. We will move out from my mother. We will live separately, together." Alice turned her head at the sound of her husband's voice, turned towards the sounds that had burst into the village silence, and said only one phrase. "You are mistaken. This is not his child. John is from another man." After a slight hesitation, she added, "It's already late. I'll let you stay overnight in the house. It's dark outside. Who knows? If you come back home so late, some bad people might attack you. Will you have another chance to return from the other side?" Deciding to hide her sarcasm, the woman added, "Tomorrow, all three of us will go to the city and take a DNA paternity test. I want to personally hand the results to Eleanor Margaret. Are you in shock from hearing the news that you are not Johnny's biological father? It will pass. Such metamorphoses happen in life. None of us lost or won. One won." Ben took a few steps back. He didn't believe what his wife had just told him. She had made it all up out of hurt, humiliation, and betrayal. She definitely didn't have another man parallel to him when they met. He would have known, felt it. These were fabrications, nonsense, gibberish. She decided to hurt him this way, and in his soul, he agreed that she had the right to act like this, considering how he and his mother had treated her. Everything was so tangled. He needed to find a guiding thread and get out of this life labyrinth. Why Ben suddenly remembered the myths of ancient Greece and the Minotaur? He couldn't answer right now. He thought feverishly that he definitely wouldn't stay overnight in the village. Each of them needed to get through the night with this new trouble separately. Morning would be wiser. Alice fed little John, checked the food supply in the refrigerator, while the baby lay peacefully on the big grandfather's bed. Then she rocked him to sleep and climbed into bed herself with the soft down comforter. Her mother was far away, and she had almost no friends left after getting married. There was no one she could consult about how to live on. The first feeling was that a huge, heavy stone had fallen from her shoulders. She had finally decided to tell her husband the truth. Johnny was Raven's son. How many times had she told herself that her lie would be revealed anyway? How many different scenarios had she replayed in her mind? But she didn't know beforehand that she would blurt out this information to Ben in today's strange, one could say, unexpectedly cruel circumstances for her. And yet she felt an incredible relief that she no longer had to be hypocritical and lie. That old story had come to light. Secrets always become known. Now she had no doubt about that. On that day, a little over a year ago, one of her colleagues was having a big and lavish wedding. At work, no one had time for borscht and cutlets. In the dormitory, everyone was talking about Iris inviting all the girls to a local bar for a bachelorette party. They whispered, Iris's groom was one of those musicians. He played the cello in the Philharmonic, and before that, he played drums in a rock band. They said that in the bar where they were going, his old friends would perform all evening. They had a tour somewhere nearby. So, the buddies decided to make a surprise. But he found out everything in advance and told Iris to gather her girlfriends for the party too. He was as jealous as the devil. He told her not to even think about going anywhere else with the girls. Allie flatly refused to go to the bar with everyone. It wasn't her type of entertainment, listening to rock concerts at full volume, the low frequencies pounding in your head. What pleasure was there in that? The whole friendly female gang persuaded her, even dressed her from head to toe so she would match the appearance of such an unusual party format for her. In a short denim skirt sparkling with sequins, hiding her lush figure, Allie felt like a clown in a circus arena. And those black polka dot tights kept trying to slide down from her backside. She should have worn her old tried-and-true ones instead of going for this beauty. The expected rock band was supposed to perform at the edge of the dance floor. The prepared musical instruments were already shining there in all their glory. Wires enveloped the entire hall. Some middle-aged man tested the microphone a couple of times. Check, check, guys. Can you hear me? The hall, burning with impatience, enthusiastically assured him that they could hear him very well, even perfectly. And then they came out, the musician guys. Tall, slender, somehow cosmic in their head-to-toe leather outfits, everywhere studded with metal rivets wherever possible. Alice's grandfather would have said, "Look at those shaggy ones." The Kings had luxurious, clean, long hair, falling in waves onto their muscular shoulders. Even the hair color was split in half, like figures on a chessboard, anthracite and brunettes. The sight was mesmerizing. When music was added to the visual effect, the audience burst into some crazy, all-consuming delight. At the girls' table at Iris's bachelorette party, drinks flowed like a river. But for snacks, there were only canapés with cheese and fruit, and small tartlets with light salads. The conceptuality did little to save their appetite. The culprit of the celebration wanted to do everything like a social reception, to show her guests how sophisticated she was in this matter. This wasn't standing at the stove in a cafe and preparing heaps of dishes for banquets. An hour later, under the roar of another hit by some Western band, Allie realized that she was starting to confuse grapes with cream and sliced oranges with lemons drowning in a pile of sugar crystals. The hall around her somehow strangely hummed and swayed. Maybe she shouldn't have indulged in the cocktails so much. But they tasted like fruit compote, and they were decorated so splendidly. How could one resist and not try all kinds? All the girls in the company were in some kind of agitated state. Their eyes shone. Their smiles were wide. Some reckless abandon had taken over the audience in the hall. During the break, the girls flocked to the restroom, where everyone carefully reapplied makeup, which was smudging on their flushed faces. Allie struggled with her tights for the umpteenth time. The coquettish piece of clothing, bought the day before, caused her a lot of inconvenience. The war with the black polka dots ended with her patience snapping. The hosiery item, marked by a big hole, was now an army of runs rushing to conquer territory in different directions. It became clear that she had nothing else to wear under her short skirt. Alice returned to the table in disarray, and then Iris's groom arrived, dragging his friends with him, those very leather-clad rock musicians. Excited by such unprecedented honor, the young ladies began to actively squeeze onto the soft sofas. Next to Alice, they squeezed in a dark-haired guy with brown eyes. In the general commotion, the handsome guy accidentally touched the girl's leg. He started, expertly fixing his eyes on her. "Bold, aren't we, lady? It's the end of November, practically winter." Alice immediately, covered in crimson spots, began to justify herself. "I was wearing tights, but they just ripped. I had to throw them away." The guy looked at her attentively, then cast an appraising glance over her figure under the oversized sweater. He remarked sadly, "I don't think that's a reason to freeze. I'll be right back." 5 minutes later, Alice was surprised to see the brunette who had just been sitting next to her making some mysterious signs at her near the bar counter. She had plenty of boldness after the cocktails. She clumsily got out from behind the table and shuffled over there. Alone. In the bag were leggings, black, wonderfully stretchy. A real salvation in her situation. In her case, it was such luck that she almost purred with pleasure. "Lord, you really exist. You sent me this brown-eyed night. Thank God, otherwise I was completely frozen. And now I look much more decent." When Alice returned to the table, the musicians had already returned to their creative duties. Iris and the other girls didn't even notice her absence. They were again enthusiastically pouring and snacking. Everyone was impressed by the news. After the party, it was decided not to disperse. Iris's groom invited everyone to his dacha to have coffee and chat with his friends. Tomorrow evening, they were supposed to continue on their strict tour route. Big stages were not yet available to them, but they enjoyed deserved success in youth and nightclubs, on the stages of shopping and entertainment complexes. Everyone earns a living as they can, especially when they are still so young. After the party ended, they spilled out of the bar in a lively crowd. The guys had their old Pazik bus, and everyone, along with their instruments, fit into it. Allie, endlessly grateful to the guy who had helped her out, wanted to thank him, but in the warm cabin, she immediately sweetly dozed off. She vaguely remembered how they got there. Then she thought she heard Iris's voice. "Oh yes, our Allie is completely out of it, dear. Is there a free room anywhere here? I'll put her to sleep now. She's unlikely to participate in the rest of the party." Then she thought, she and her friend went up to the second floor. The last thing Alice remembered was an amazingly soft, cozy blanket. She curled up under it, head and all, and fell into the arms of Uncle Morpheus. Outside, the first snowflakes of the year began to fall. Autumn was slowly yielding its rights to winter. On the first floor, the young people lit the fireplace, drank tea with fruit, actively discussing whether to add cinnamon. Someone turned on quiet music, and the house was filled with the soothing sounds of some wonderful blues. Alice didn't hear any of this anymore. In the very comfortable leggings and warm sweater that no longer restricted her movements, she slept so serenely, as if she were back in her grandfather's village house. Now the old man would adjust the blanket, kiss her forehead goodnight. Simple human happiness. It doesn't necessarily have to be big and noticeable. Sometimes it lies in such little things. It's a pity that some people have forgotten how to understand this. So much interesting and important passes them by. Early in the morning, surprisingly cheerful, without any hangover, for the first moment she couldn't understand where she was. Snow lay outside the window. It smelled of citrus, vanilla, and cinnamon for some reason. Had she slept until New Year's out of fright, like Pushkin's Sleeping Beauty? Someone was peacefully snoring on the wide bed next to her. Alice quickly realized it was her savior from yesterday, sleeping without taking off his leather pants and black linen shirt. How did they end up in the same bed? She didn't remember anything at all. She involuntarily admired the guy's handsome face, his long fluffy eyelashes, his lips, near which a small hard crease had formed, his beautifully sculpted body without flaws. Allie had minimal romantic experience. She hadn't had any serious intimate relationships with men yet. At her graduation party, a classmate timidly kissed her during a dance, whispering in her ear, "Allie, I've liked you for a long time, but I didn't dare approach you before." She herself had never paid attention to the bespectacled guy with great potential. She danced with him out of politeness. The last dance? Why refuse? Then this clumsy fellow sent her a letter from Moscow, saying he had gotten into university on his own, without connections. But that was the last she heard of him. He vanished forever, taking with him her first youthful infatuation. On this, in fact, Alice's romantic affairs ended. At college, she mastered the art of cooking. Then she was happy. It was no joke. She was immediately invited to work at the factory cafe on the recommendation of her teacher. She was given a separate room in the dormitory. Was there time for dates, bouquets, courting? Allie quietly slipped out of bed and went downstairs, where the rock band was sleeping sprawled out on two unfolded large sofas, mixed in with her friends. Only Iris and her groom were not visible. Apparently there was more than one separate room in the house like the one she had slept in that night. She found the bathroom easily. She decided it wouldn't be a crime to take a shower in someone else's unfamiliar house. Letting down her wet hair, she gladly put on the soft leggings and sweater again. She couldn't find her denim skirt, her torturer from yesterday, anywhere. Creeping into the kitchen, she found sugar and flour in the wall cabinets. There was kefir and eggs in the refrigerator. She quickly whipped up a batter for delicate pancakes. She smiled to herself that the company in the living room hadn't stirred once. Pouring herself a large glass of kefir and putting a stack of fragrant pancakes on a plate, Allie tiptoed upstairs. She would have a snack now. She had a ferocious appetite, dry her hair, and look for a way to get back to the city from here. She didn't really know where she was. At least it was Sunday. She wouldn't be absent from work. Quietly opening the door to her unexpected bedroom, she almost dropped the tray. The handsome brunette with impossible black curls was already awake. Two curious brown eyes stared at her. The guy's lips spread into a playful smile. Pancakes and kefir. That's what will save a young musician dying of a hangover right now. The amazingly handsome guy extended his hand to Alice and introduced himself. Raven. And what should I call you? And let's switch to you. Why do we need formalities, right? Alice introduced herself. Scatterbrain. Girl, are you serious? You have a strange name. The brunette lazily stretched, took the tray from her hands, immediately snatched a still-hot pancake from it, and smiled blissfully. And why do we, rock fans, need names? Nicknames will do for now. The public loves mystery. Who made the pancake so early? You yourself or someone else from your cooking clan? I was terribly hungry, Allie admitted. And the guys will wake up, and breakfast will already be on the table. A quick dish. It didn't occur to me. Raven ate another pancake, drank exactly half of the kefir from the tall glass, and offered the rest of the feast to Allie. You cook great. Well done. Someone will get such a caring wife, a hostess. Alice wasn't shy with this guy at all. For some reason, she felt light and free with him from the very first minute. She placed the couple of remaining pastries she had made on the windowsill. For some reason, besides the huge bed, two bedside tables with intricate legs, and a large TV on the wall, there was no other furniture in the room. No chair or armchair to sit on. Seeing her confused gaze searching the corners, the guy invited her with a kingly gesture. Come, lie down with me. I won't eat you. There's enough room for two here. He began to search the blanket with his hand and found the TV remote. The screen immediately lit up with a cozy blue glow. "Come on, let's watch a movie," he suggested, flipping through channels. "I've forgotten when I last watched TV. We're always on the road with concerts." Allie didn't refuse, didn't flirt, or insist that, "I'm not like that." After the evening, she felt a pleasant tiredness, and such a handsome young man certainly wouldn't be interested in her. Where was he in his cool leather outfit? And where was she, a simple cook from a factory cafe in someone else's leggings and an ill-fitting sweater? She suddenly remembered, "Thank you, Raven, for the leggings. You have no idea how much you helped me out with them yesterday." The guy smiled again with that impossible smile of his, full of unobtrusive charm, and reassured her. "Well, my younger sister tagged along with us on tour from the capital during her vacation. She only lasted a week, and the silly girl forgot her bag with things. I later poked my curious nose into it. Underwear, leggings, some other women's stuff. See, they came in handy." Allie was completely calmed down after his story, but then Raven, for some reason, smelled her hair and delivered his verdict. "You smell delicious, like shampoo and vanilla pancakes at the same time. I just want to kiss such a miracle." He rubbed his nose against her ear, and at his words, Alice's stomach suddenly dropped somewhere down. She didn't understand what was happening to her. The feeling was both frightening and sweet. Meanwhile, the guy unobtrusively turned her towards him and indeed kissed her. She didn't know it could be like this, that a woman could suddenly be overwhelmed by such feelings that everything else around would completely fade away. Raven didn't know what to do. He had gotten into trouble again. He was her first. He thought that the girl, who had calmly lain down next to him, perfectly understood how this could end. And here was such an outcome. It was hard to tell if it was amusing or lamentable. They had to leave in 5 or 6 hours. Tomorrow they had their next concert at a friend's nightclub 500 kilometers away from the city. The life of a nomad didn't allow him to have a steady girlfriend yet, so that's how it turned out. Almost every city had a casual wife. A muffled snore came from behind him, and then Alice asked him, "Do you regret what happened?" "Forget it. Consider that nothing happened, and I'll keep the leggings as a souvenir," she chuckled. "I really don't feel like going back to the dormitory in the cold without them." At that moment, there was a knock on their door. Iris's groom's curious head stuck out. The guy tried to assess the situation with a keen gaze and understand what had happened here, but he was disappointed. There was definitely nothing between them. Raven and a dumpling from a factory cafe? Don't make my boots laugh. He invited them downstairs with a satisfied look, announcing that everyone had decided to stay at the dacha. Pizza, shish kebab, and other goodies had already been ordered from a city restaurant. After the lively night, the pancakes were eaten in one sitting. People craved new bread and new spectacles. Citing business, Allie refused to stay at the dacha. Unexpectedly, Raven also said that he had an errand in the city, so he would also leave with Alice in the same taxi. They were silent the whole way. Near her dormitory, he paid the driver and entered the building after her. She didn't chase him away. She turned at the sound of his footsteps. "What do you want?" He answered sharply, "To talk. I need to leave here knowing that I haven't left a wound in your soul." Allie looked at him carefully again. "Well, let's go to my room. I'll make us my signature coffee, treat you to some homemade cookies I baked specially for the bachelorette party, and saved a little for myself." He couldn't explain to himself why he attacked her again in her room. It was some kind of obsession. Both pulled away sharply. He looked at his watch a little scared, trying to manage to say something. "Allie, I have to leave. I can't promise you anything, but I want you to know. Our meeting will not be something ordinary, accidental, or untouched by my soul for me." She stroked his unruly dark curls, looked into his eyes, and calmly replied, "We both know that such things happen. We couldn't resist, despite all the contradictions between two completely different people. Our worlds move parallel. They are not destined to intersect at one point. Go with God. I am glad that fate gave me the chance to experience happiness for the first time with you. I am strong, and everything passes, as King Solomon would say." Raven kissed Alice on the lips, unable to tear himself away from their taste and light scent of vanilla. For the first time, he thought that the romantic life of free troubadours had a downside. Such a life forces them to constantly leave people important to them, their relatives, their loved ones. Allie didn't go out to see him off, afraid she would cry shamefully, showing that her heart was breaking into pieces of despair. She pulled on her old terry cloth robe, gritted her teeth, and gathered all her will into a fist. She went to the fogged-up window and pressed her nose against the glass. It was snowing again. From her second floor, she could see Raven approaching the car, and snowflakes settling on the collar of his black-studded leather jacket, on his shiny black hair. A black comet that flew by. So inaccessible, so desired. The real test for Alice was her first meeting with her newborn son. The black curls of hair on his head painfully wounded her heart. She somehow acutely felt that she didn't love Ben, that she was deceiving herself, that she didn't miss Raven. It hadn't passed, hadn't been forgotten, hadn't been erased. She remembered that one day with him, every moment of unearthly existence nearby. Thoughts came to Allie more and more often. She didn't want to lie to Ben, didn't want to betray him, was tired of being fake. For some reason, her conscience didn't bother her regarding Eleanor Margaret. She was a strange woman. The young mother felt that her words and feigned care were false, but she closed her eyes to all of it. The elderly woman liked playing the role of a future grandmother, and so be it. Let her indulge in vain illusions. When the son was born, she would tell Ben the truth, that he was not his father. That would be right. That would be fair. Alice didn't have time to explain herself to her husband. He died absurdly, wildly, unexpectedly. Then there was the hospital, long days between sleep and reality, childbirth. After the common grief, Eleanor Margaret seemed to be replaced. She surrounded her daughter-in-law with such attention, fussed and cared for Johnny so much that even the ice in Alice's heart stirred. Could she have been wrong about this woman? And then that accidentally overheard conversation at night, which instantly sobered her up, instantly explained everything. When Alice was cleaning her grandfather's house, she unexpectedly found a letter from him, hidden in a box with her mother's letters from Germany. She didn't bother her mother, just said briefly that she had returned to the village, that it was necessary, and Johnny was with her. Grandma Susan didn't need to worry. Her mother promised to visit in 6 months, but for a couple of months, to enjoy her grandson, see Russia a little, show the country to Paul. Let her grown-up son know that his roots are from here, from the depths of a huge, mighty country. The letter from her grandfather was clearly prepared in advance, not written just before his death. He again reminded her that her native home was always waiting for her in the village. Alice's heart cried, especially when she carefully examined the thick envelope again. Inside were 2 red-orange 5,000-ruble bills. And on the other side of the envelope, a note from her grandfather. "Don't be offended, Allie. My pension is meager. This is all I could gather for you for the first time. Buy something for yourself from me as a keepsake." Alice burst into tears, remembering her grandfather's kind face from the time when they lived happily in the old strong house. And she thought, this is my first capital for a new life. I will manage. In the village, everyone will help each other, and then I'll find a job. She was right. A part-time cook position was immediately found for her near their picturesque village. More and more enterprising city dwellers began buying up land. One even went further. He organized a small cowshed, a small production facility for processing fresh milk. For his small team of 20 people, a cook was just what was needed. They quickly agreed. The new boss allowed her to bring Johnny with her. The boy grew up surprisingly calm, intelligent, naively understood that it was difficult for his mother now and didn't cause extra trouble. As she promised, Alice took a DNA paternity test for Ben. Eleanor Margaret was furious. All her dreams, for which she had put in so much effort, collapsed. The boomerang had returned for her insidious soul. Ben, having rented an apartment, moved out and immersed himself in work. He cut off all his mother's conversations about Alice and Johnny. Eleanor Margaret told everyone about Ben, that he couldn't communicate with normal women after his village wife. That's how she defended her Lizzie. Ben and Alice divorced quickly, after living together for just over a year. Both no longer wanted to see each other, and their souls had been aching since Ben's death. Sorrowful facts had replaced the pleasant memories of their marriage. The young woman now had only one joy, her son John. When she came home from work, she would look at his black curls, and life felt worth living. What a motivation was sitting in her arms right now, happily eating milk porridge. Theodore sat in his office, located in the penthouse of a tall building, mentally summing things up. A year ago, he received a red diploma in law, to his parents' great astonishment. He studied easily, almost playfully. Behind him were his long black mane, leather and vinyl clothes, and an endless fireworks display of shiny rivets. Only occasionally did he take his guitar out of the closet, pluck the strings, remembering the wild tours. After he left, their band soon fell apart on its own. All his friends had already gotten married and were now raising a noisy gang of kids. Iris and her drummer even had twins right away. Now their family was expecting another addition. They were missing a girl to go with their 2 boys. As his friend said, "Raven, you won't believe it. I dream of braiding the hair of a little girl who looks like my Iris. I never thought I'd be so happy with an ordinary cook from a factory cafe." And Theodore never thought that in 6 years, he still wouldn't be able to forget his vanilla donut. He made inquiries. Iris said that Alice got married soon after they met, then had a son and moved somewhere new. Iris didn't want to hurt her friend, didn't consider it possible to tell Raven about her secret. Romances, the kind that are called casual relationships, both partners understood that these relationships were without any obligations. They had dinner in a charming restaurant setting, spent an almost unforgettable night amidst the romance of lit candles, a bucket of iced champagne, sweets, and fruit. Always like a holiday, always beautiful. In the morning, Theodore understood that this separate office, the position of head of the legal department in the company, his father had given him as an advance, in anticipation of future services. He also knew that all the thorns of youth were in the past, that he would try not to let his father down with the trust placed in him for the sake of a future successful career and well-being. The secretary looked into the office. "Theodore Stanley, they asked me to remind you that tomorrow is an important corporate event, a party celebrating the signing of a major long-term contract, for which you prepared the documents." The former Raven grimaced with annoyance. After the string of their touring performances across Russia, he had grown tired of these sparkling gatherings, the parade of outfits, the empty gossip, the social chatter. Well, there was nothing to be done. He had to go. His position obliged him. Damn it all. Putting on a strict classic suit, as required by the dress code and his father, and a white shirt with a narrow fashionable tie, Theodore looked at himself in the mirror. In this outfit, neither his rock band friends nor his numerous fans would recognize him now. Where was that Raven now? By the age of 30, He had turned into a mature, serious man with intelligent, perceptive eyes. How much does environment, time, and surrounding society change people? There was no turning back to his former self. Alice was nervous. This was her debut in the capital. Why had she agreed to head this subsidiary catering division of the company in Moscow? Everything was different here. A different mentality. Different people. After she opened a small fast food cafe in her own city, people flocked by the hundreds. It was impossible to get through. The secret was simple. The owner and her team assembled burgers from scratch, baked the buns themselves, fried natural meat, shredded vegetables, and didn't hesitate to grind fresh coffee beans every day. One day, a restaurateur from the capital happened to be in their city on company business. Something either went wrong in his chain restaurant, or on the contrary, something good happened. Allie half listened to him, not thinking she would agree to his offer. The big shot from the capital visited their establishment for experience, wanting to see what attracted the public to provincial catering, why it was so crowded. Slipping past the service area, he sat down at a table, tried everything on the menu, then asked to speak to the owner. The conversation spun like a crazy carousel. The experienced restaurateur said he was very impressed with her sensible approach to business matters, lamenting that his staff in Moscow either lacked sufficient experience or were lazy and unmotivated, excessively greedy. Even quite decent salaries didn't make his employees more efficient. He offered Alice to head the banquet appetizer division in his catering company, which provided off-site event services. He promised to help with apartment rental near the production site, in a building also belonging to his capital property. After he left, Allie was surrounded by her own colleagues, who bombarded her with questions about what the respectable man wanted. They urged her in unison to agree. However scary it may be, you'll turn around and he'll be going to school in Moscow. The capital isn't a regional center. The prospects for the boy are completely different. Again, Moscow doesn't believe in tears. It shows mercy, patronizes, gives opportunities to those who aren't afraid to work honestly, with passion. Theodore was already tired of the parade of faces and dialogues. He witnessed a conversation between his father and his longtime partner, one of the famous restaurateurs of the capital. "My friend, where did you dig up this treasure? Did you really reel her in with your clever hook in the provinces? By the will of fate, I often have to attend such events. I have never seen such original appetizers, such intricate, stylish presentation anywhere else. Why don't you introduce me to your culinary sorceress?" "Certainly, I'll call her now." Theodore sat slightly to the side, and he could perfectly see the restaurateur calling someone on his mobile phone, and a couple of minutes later, she was walking across the hall towards them. His vanilla donut. Alice, Allie, Allie. The woman for whom he was the first man. The one who became the engine of change in his life. An inexplicable dream that suddenly became reality before his eyes. Alice didn't recognize her Raven in the dapper, imposing man. She glanced at him briefly, walked past him to the two men, who immediately began praising her culinary talent. She replied modestly, "The secret is simple. I love my work very much. I put a piece of my soul and imagination into every creation. The rest is a matter of technique." She promised both of them that she was always at their service for organizing banquets, then returned to her team. The party naturally approached its logical conclusion, and guests gradually began to leave. Alice, having given her last instructions, hurried home. Johnny was in the care of a gray-haired elderly neighbor today. She had to pick him up from her. Outside, an unfamiliar man slowly approached her and grabbed her hand excitedly. "Alice, don't you recognize me? It's me, Raven." She couldn't believe her eyes, but she immediately believed her fluttering heart. She wasn't going to play games, put on airs of mystery, or feed her first man riddles. Strange as it sounded, after her husband Ben, she had remained faithful all these years to that cosmic rock musician who had forever entered her soul. Contenders for her heart had never measured up to him. Why get involved in a romance if you knew it would be in vain? They walked home along the road. Raven said only a few words. "Now I am Theodore. That is my real name." As for Allie, God knows why she remembered an old movie that her mother and grandfather loved to watch on their old TV. It was called Alice Theodore's Beloved Wife. She thought such combinations only happened in movies. Before the entrance, she turned around. "We're here, Theodore. I don't want to beat around the bush and tell tall tales. I believe you have the right to know. You have a son, John. He is 5 years old now, and he is quite a grown-up, serious man, as he calls himself. At least, he is a quite intelligent and reasonable child. I don't want to traumatize his psyche now. You must decide how I should introduce you to him. Is this your dad, or is this Uncle Teddy? I am raising him myself. I divorced my husband a long time ago. That's a long, separate story. If you feel that he is not for you, you don't need him, you're not interested, I will accept your decision." At that moment, the entrance door swung open, and a group of young people came out onto the street. Theodore resolutely pushed her aside and asked only one thing. "What floor are we on?" She couldn't speak from excitement right now. The man pressed the elevator button, then impatiently shifted from foot to foot near the neighbor's apartment door. Black-haired, curly-haired Johnny flew out onto the landing like a shot. With an inquisitive gaze, he raised his huge eyes, like a raven's, to him, questioningly, next to his mother. "Hello, son," Theodore said. "Let's go home quickly. I have a lot to tell you about myself. I sincerely hope you can forgive me for being gone for so long and not being there for you, for your mother." Somewhere far away in the sky, at that moment, two parallel lines met at a single point. But no one noticed this mathematical miracle except 3 people: a man with black hair, a boy with black hair, and a pretty woman of pleasant fullness, who again smelled slightly of vanilla.